Hey sneaker friends, what's going on? How are you guys today? I've got what you've all been waiting for. Yes, this is it. The first review, my first time ever wearing Boost. And yes, I did go with the Ultra Boost. I returned the NMD. You guys were so right. It didn't feel anything like Ultra Boost. So after this intro, you're gonna get all the details. Okay, so I got this shoe last week. I think I got it on Wednesday, which was just in time for my race weekend. My husband races BMW cars, and so we did a road trip to California. This was the only shoe I took with me because I wanted to give it a real test. The days are super long on race weekends, and so I knew I'd be doing a ton of walking because I have to walk from our pit to pre-grid to the starter stand. Like, I have to walk all over the place. And so typically, like, it's easily to put in 5, 6, 7 miles. And so this weekend, I actually put in 4 days, 24 miles. So these shoes have 24 miles on them. 2.5 miles are running. I did a tempo run on the track, on the racetrack. So it was on asphalt. And yeah, let's dig into it. So I got these at Adidas.com. I think I got it through their app. I paid $180 for them, and they had free shipping, and they showed up in I think about a week. So I weighed these shoes on the scale, and the right came in at 269 and the left came in at 276 for a total of 545 grams for the pair. Now these are a women's 7.5. I did order true to size, and I think they do fit well. They do fit true to size. I feel like I got the correct size for my fit. Okay, so the technology, right, is knit upper on Boost foam. Okay, so if we start with the bottom, the rubber. This is a Continental rubber that you can see in the logo that Adidas has partnered with them. Overall, it's 1.75 millimeter web with 1.75 millimeter lugs. So you have a total of 3.5 millimeters of rubber. The hardness measures in at about 70, so it's pretty standard rubber hardness and thickness, so it should be just great. I did notice when I put the shoes on right away, it was actually the first thing I noticed, like the rubber. It made that sound on the floor, it's like the squeaky clean sound, and it just felt traction, and I really like that. I don't remember the last time I felt that, so I'm a fan right now of the Continental rubber. And you'll notice in this shoe, just like the Disrupt, that the outsoles absolutely hang off. It's kind of in a crash pad area in the heel. You'll notice that the midsole angles up a little bit and the outsole hangs off to help with that impact on crash. So also notice in the bottom of the shoe, there's actually this cutout area that has some gray TPU plastic in there. And it's actually called Torsion System, which is actually written on the black plastic there. And that's a stability system, basically to give this foam a little bit of stability. And so how it works is there's a finger that wraps back into the heel and also up the side. And then there's a tiny little finger on the medial side that wraps just barely into the forefoot. Now this system purely is, torsion is when something twists, and so this system is just to limit the amount of twist. So it's a harder material put over the softer foam, and it merely is to limit how much twisting happens. Let's move to the midsole. So the midsole is what everyone's talking about, right? So the foam that is in here is a BASF foam that Adidas calls Boost. And so it's an eTPU, which is an expanding TPU, which is a polymer foam. And so it takes the great properties of TPU and it combines it with foam. And so foam is basically when air is injected into a material, then you get a foaming action happening. Think of like when you brush your teeth and the toothpaste and it starts foaming up in your mouth. Like that's kind of what foam, right? There's air bubbles getting into that toothpaste, creating a little bit of foam. So it's kind of the same with this foam, except that they use steam to stick these little pellets together. I think it's pretty fascinating. Obviously the visual is very particular. It looks like styrofoam. And so I don't know specifics about this molding process, but what I can tell is these little dots, these little bumps that are all over the midsole, those are vent holes. And that's for steam, maybe moisture, and air to get out of the mold so that the material can fill in and take the shape of the mold. And so they're very strategically placed. I'm guessing they couldn't get rid of them. They need a lot of vents. And so they're strategically placed in very smooth lines, except for in a couple areas. So I thought that was interesting. You'll also notice on the bottom, there's all these marks of these 3 lines. So it's like a circle with 3 lines in it. Not an Adidas logo, but it is actually an ejector pin. That's what I've seen ejector pin witness marks look like. And so it looks like, especially in the thinner area, they have a lot of ejector pins to kind of get this foam piece out of the mold. A couple other things you'll notice about this foam is there's kind of a line that goes straight down the center. I'm guessing that that's the parting line, so the split in the mold where the male and the female half come together. More on that in another video. But below that line, you'll notice a whole bunch of horizontal lines. So I think they just tried to probably play with the texture a little bit and give it a little bit different look. It could have been for molding purposes too. It's kind of hard to say unless they show me the molding. So overall, I did not notice the softness or bounce of this foam for the first few hours that I had it on. It wasn't until about halfway through the first day when I was walking around, and I was walking a little slower because I was a little more tired, and I was like, wow, that's really squishy. And from that point forward, I noticed that the foam was super soft and squishy, and I quite enjoyed it. It was something that caught my attention many times throughout the day moving forward, especially in the evening when my feet were really tired. Okay, so when I measured the durometer of the foam, remember with my favorite measurement tool, Shore hardness. So when I measure the hardness of this foam, it actually registers at a 30, which is soft. It was actually hard to measure because it was so soft. So I'm gonna say it's in around the range of probably the upper 20s to the low 30s, which is very soft foam. I am quite impressed with how soft this foam is. I did not feel like my feet were bottoming out or anything, but let's see how long it lasts. Okay. Let's move to the inside of the shoe. So if you take out the sock liner, let's actually talk about the sock liner. You're gonna notice a super thin, it's about 3 millimeters thick. It's even packed out more than that already since I've been wearing them. You'll notice a pattern on the back of it with also the kind of vent holes. I highly doubt that those vent holes are needed for this part. I think it's just a design aesthetic to tie it to the midsole. But then you'll look at, it's kind of like the outsole geometry. This sock liner is very thin so that you feel the midsole, right? So you feel the cushioning. They don't want you necessarily feeling this. This is merely probably to keep you from feeling the strobel and the stitching of the strobel, and also a nice place to do some graphics. So if we move on to the strobel, I'm noticing some cool things about the strobel. So you'll notice that it has kind of the same outsole pattern cut out of it. And you'll also notice it is not glued down except for the edge. So that's a way to make the strobel effective to be used. So the strobel helps basically get the upper put on the last so that it holds its shape. And so that you can create the shape and then you have something solid to glue it to. So they didn't put the adhesive between the strobel and the midsole, and that's primarily so that you don't, again, feel adhesive. So adhesive typically when it dries, it gets harder. It's like a laminate, right? Think of plywood. So plywood is layers and layers of wood with adhesive between it. That's kind of what happens to shoes. When you add a lot of adhesive, so there's adhesive between the outsole and the midsole, and then usually there's an entire layer of adhesive between the midsole and the upper. But in this case, they only put it around the perimeter of the strobel, so they glue that part down. So then literally all you're feeling from under your foot is obviously your sock. Then you feel a little bit of this sock liner, you feel a little bit of strobel, but now we're up to maybe 4 millimeters, 5. And then you're just feeling directly the foam. And so it's a way to keep the shoes flexible and also basically less plywood-like, if you will. And the strobel measures at about 0.5 millimeter, maybe 3/4. It was a little bit hard to get calipers in there and actually measure it, but it's just a thin, non-woven material, pretty basic. All right, so let's talk about the upper on this shoe. So we know that the exterior is all knit. This knit is thick. I was surprised. I don't think I've seen knit this thick except for some sweaters that I have. And so I was really surprised in how thick it is. That's definitely attributing to the weight in this shoe. So you'll notice there's a couple seams in this shoe. Let me grab this one. So you have your standard heel seam, pretty normal, But the cool thing is on the lining, they did not seam the lining in the heel. So you don't have two seams sitting on top of each other. Two seams sitting on top two seams sitting on top of each other creates a hardness and also just a thicker area that's more likely to irritate. Instead, they have a seam over here on the medial side of the collar, kind of hidden over there. They also have a seam in the tongue. So it looks initially like the upper's all one piece, but if you look closely, you can see there's a closed seam between the tongue and the upper. And that's just to help give that shape where the upper kind of comes up higher. And so of that, the knit in the upper is two pieces. Now, if we go into the lining, you're gonna notice that the lining is nice and smooth in the heel because there's no seam back there. There's a stitch that goes all the way through the outside, catches the foam, you can feel foam in here, and goes all the way through the lining to hold that foam in place. There's also the tongue stitch that goes all the way through the lining, and I generally don't like it when stitches go all the way through the lining because there's a chance you're gonna feel it on your foot. And in this particular shoe, you'll notice that the cage actually also is stitched down to the knit. And it is stitched all the way through the knit. So I actually did feel that on my right foot on the lateral side, and I didn't really care for that. So the lacing, it's basically a flat lace. If you push on it a little bit, you can get it to be an oval, but it's basically a flat lace. It goes through the lace cage, which their logo is on top, and it just laces into that, so it doesn't lace through the upper or anything like that. I think it's an effective lacing system. I could feel when I tightened it too much, I could feel the pressure definitely, so I just had to be careful with that. Let's talk about this cage and heel counter actually. So heel counter you have on the medial and lateral side. It's connected by a bridge in the back. One thing that I was surprised in is usually you would have the heel counter and the cage like this, these two pieces of plastic that overlap. Normally they would be kind of slotted so that they fit each other like a male and female part, so that you have a good location when you're stock fitting them, but they don't seem to be. So it makes kind of a rigid, kind of hard area there. I do think that it's probably a little stiffer there and thicker than it probably needs to be, and it's a good way to reduce weight. There's no internal counter in this, so all you have is the external counter, and I think it does pretty good. I didn't feel like the shoe was super unstable or anything. What they have going on with the torsion system and the heel counter, I felt like it was stable and it was fine. I did feel a little bit of pressure right in this area on my foot, which I started to irritate after a while, but otherwise the fit was quite good. There is a toe reinforcer, you'll notice if you feel in there. It's just kind of fused or glued in there. But otherwise, that's all that's in the upper. So you have a total of about 6 pieces in the upper. So it's pretty simple. It looks like a lot less, but it still does have those 6 pieces. Plus you have the lace cage and the heel counter. That covers pretty much everything on the shoe in terms of construction. Let's talk about quality. So I did not see a lot of quality concerns at all with these shoes. From a durability perspective, I think the biggest concern will be, when does this foam start to break down? When does the foam stop feeling so soft and squishy? Right now, the upper's super thick. It's a little bit warm, I think even. The outsole is plenty of traction. I mean, I'm not worried about that wearing. 4 millimeters of 70 durometer rubber is pretty good. Yeah, it's all about when that midsole foam stops feeling squishy and starts to bottom out a lot. I think that's going to be the biggest durability concern with this product. Well, so that pretty much covers my review of the Adidas Boost. Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most surprising thing about the shoe is that it's been out for 5 years and this is the first time I've ever tried them. I mean, other than that, sorry, I know what you guys are thinking. Other than that, like, it is really great. If I had never tried React, I think I would be completely blown away with this. But knowing that I tried React first, I think it's a little bit less impressive to me. So the next thing coming up is my comparison between Boost and React. I'm super excited about this one, so I'm kind of rushing through the Boost one to get to that because that's really where the meat on the bone is. All right, I hope you guys have an awesome day. Thanks for watching, and again, hey subscribers, thank you so much. If you're seeing this, we hit 1,000. What an exciting time. Like, I can't believe it. In 10 days, we had 1,000 subscribers. Huge thank you to you guys. I'm glad you like it. Let me know what you think in the comments and more suggestions. As always, have an awesome day. See ya.